When an agency's shiny promotional projects actively sabotage its daily service, that failure is called institutional priority inversion. Take a transit authority that just launched a highly publicized electric bus pilot, while simultaneously cutting its evening fixed route service. To prove the harm, auditors build a strict flowchart, starting with the agency's core mission. Then they map out the secondary initiatives, like that electric bus pilot and its PR campaigns. The conflict isn't just about raw funding. It is a literal operational trade-off. Finite resources, like driver hours and vehicle capacity, are physically diverted away from core service. That measurable displacement is called resource inversion. To prove the damage, auditors ask a critical question. If those exact same operator hours were not diverted to the pilot program, could they have been used to save those evening routes? That comparison is called the counterfactual test. When the answer is yes, this operational displacement connects directly to severe rider outcomes, direct passenger consequences like missed shifts and missed medical care, which ultimately create system-wide transportation deserts. And that highly publicized electric bus pilot is successfully running, but only because the agency sacrificed the evening operator hours that riders needed to get home.
Yo, MBCA, what's the mission? Priority inversion, that's the narrative. Resource inversion, where's the money going? Misrun service gaps, who's counting? Moving people every day, that's the goal.
How does a public agency's main goal get completely flipped upside down? It's a trap called institutional priority inversion. Take a city transit agency. Its central pool of unrestricted resources, money and staff, must flow to its primary mission. In this case, that means funding a reliable daily bus network. The inversion starts when the agency redirects that central resource pool toward a secondary initiative, like a tech pilot. Secondary projects aren't inherently bad, so when does funding one actually become a failure? It happens when those diverted resources cause a direct, measurable drop in core reliability. That trade-off is called material displacement. The tech pilot directly causes missed bus stops. Soon, this physical trade-off infects the agency's culture. Management obsesses over the pilot, and PR highlights its minor successes, actively obscuring the failing bus routes. Auditors expose this by calculating the exact daily bus improvements possible if those resources went to the core mission instead. That specific before and after comparison is called the counterfactual test. So the next time you're stuck at a transit stop, waiting for a daily bus that never shows up, the audit proves that route's failure was the exact physical trade-off that paid for the flashy pilot.
Imagine standing on a sidewalk in, the freezing rain.
Oh, the worst.
Right. Your morning bus is 40 minutes late. You're freezing. So you pull out your phone and you open up the city transit agency's brand new multi-million-dollar app.
Let me guess, it looks amazing.
Oh, it features this gorgeous, award-winning user interface. It has an integrated artificial intelligence chatbot. It even gives you a shiny virtual badge for reducing your carbon footprint. But there's just one massive problem. The live vehicle tracking is completely broken, and you still have literally no idea if your bus is ever going to show up.
Yeah, it's a maddening scenario. And yet, it feels incredibly familiar, doesn't it?
All familiar.
We see this disconnect all the time, and not just in transit, but across these massive organizations. A company or, a government agency launches a highly publicized, flashy new initiative.
The shiny object.
Yeah.
Exactly, the shiny object. Meanwhile, their most basic fundamental services are just actively crumbling underneath them, and we usually just chalk it up to standard bureaucratic incompetence and, we just move on with our day.
But what if that disconnect isn't just random incompetence? What if it's actually a highly specific, diagnosable pathology, like with actual symptoms you can measure?
Right.
Welcome to today's Deep Dives. We are looking at a really fascinating set of excerpts from a document called the MBCTA Priority Inversion Audit Framework.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one.
It is. And this methodology was originally designed for the Macon-Bibb County Transit Authority. But, as we're going to see, it offers something much bigger than just local transit guidelines.
It really does. It provides this universal diagnostic tool. The authors have essentially created an evidence-based toolkit to identify and measure this specific bureaucratic disease.
And they call it
institutional priority inversion.
So today, our mission is to unpack this methodology. And by the end of this conversation, you are going to have a completely new lens for evaluating the institutions you rely on every single day.
Absolutely. Because to understand how an organization's priorities get inverted, We have to first establish what right side up actually looks like, right?
You need a baseline.
Exactly.
Right.
For any agency, there's a baseline mission. For a transit authority, their existential purpose is providing reliable, accessible, and predictable core service.
And the framework is very firm on this. For this specific agency, core service means the scheduled fixed route transit network.
The regular buses.
Yes. The daily unglamorous heavy-duty buses moving people to the grocery store, to the doctor, to work. If they fail at that daily mobility.
They fail at their fundamental reason for existing.
Exactly. Which brings us to the core pathology here. Institutional priority inversion happens when an agency systematically emphasizes or manages, funds, measures secondary initiatives.
Like the app. In a way that materially displaces or weakens that primary public mission. These secondary initiatives could be anything from a trendy technology pilot to a massive rebranding campaign, or even specialized boutique services that only serve a tiny fraction of the population.
You know, the analogy that immediately comes to mind is owning a house where the roof is actively caving in.
Oh, that's a good one.
Like water is just pouring into the living room every time it rains. But instead of paying a contractor to fix the roof, you go to a home improvement store and drop like $10,000 on a massive high-tech smart fridge.
With the touchscreen on the door.
With the touchscreen on the door. You invite all your neighbors over to admire the fridge, completely ignoring the fact that you are literally standing in a puddle.
Yeah.
You are emphasizing a secondary initiative, having cool kitchen tech at the direct expense of the core mission of a house, which is keeping the weather outside.
And if we look at the psychology of your homeowner analogy there, it explains exactly why executives do this. I mean, fixing a roof is stressful.
It's awful. Right. It's expensive, it takes a long time, and when the job is completely finished, your house looks exactly the same as it did before the leak.
There is zero glory in basic maintenance.
Zero. But buying a smart fridge, that provides an immediate dopamine hit. It's visible, it's a status symbol, and bureaucracies fall into the exact same psychological trap.
Because there are no ribbon-cutting ceremonies for, like, routine bus maintenance.
Exactly. But launching an electric scooter pilot program, that gets the mayor's picture in the newspaper.
We should probably be careful to point out a crucial nuance in the framework right here, though.
Yeah.
The methodology does not presume that secondary projects are inherently bad.
Right.
Like, a smart fridge is a great piece of technology. Innovation in government is a good thing.
Yes, the audit is not designed to attack innovation or, trap agencies into never trying anything new. It's a strictly neutral assessment looking at one specific metric, which is material displacement. Meaning, if you buy the smart fridge and your roof is completely solid, your foundation is strong, your bills are paid, there is no inversion. You're just upgrading your life.
Oh, okay.
The inversion only triggers when buying that fridge means you literally cannot afford the roof repair and you just allow the floorboards to rot.
Okay, so it's a question of finite resources. It's a zero-sum trade-off.
Exactly.
So how does the framework actually catch an agency doing this? Because they're not going to just admit it. The methodology breaks the diagnosis down into 4 specific areas, and usually the first symptom of a sick organization shows up in how they talk.
Yes, the PR spin.
Right. The framework looks for a public relations imbalance, it calls narrative inversion.
And this involves analyzing the public-facing output of the agency. The auditors look at the press releases, the social media feeds, the glossy annual reports.
The presentations to the city council, all that stuff.
Right. They are looking for a disconnect between the story the agency is telling and the reality on the ground. So, if the daily fixed route buses are experiencing severe systemic delays and major driver shortages, but the agency's communication channels are just completely saturated with promotional posts about a new microtransit app.
That constitutes a narrative inversion.
Exactly.
Okay, I do have to push back on this slightly, though.
Sure.
Because at first glance, that just sounds like standard marketing to me. I mean, a transit agency, or any company for that matter, isn't going to buy a billboard that says, we are really struggling to keep the buses running on time. Please be patient.
No, of course not.
You hire a PR team to put your best foot forward and highlight your successes. So it seems kind of overly punitive for an auditor to penalize an agency just because their marketing department is, doing its job.
That is a very fair critique, and the authors of the framework actually anticipate it. Narrative inversion does not exist in a vacuum. A slick PR team covering up operational flaws is pretty common, but it only becomes a toxic institutional problem when it is paired with the second category.
Which is management inversion.
Yes. Management inversion. The framework deliberately separates the public spin from the actual behind closed doors management priorities.
So, like, if the marketing team is tweeting about the shiny new app, but the executive leadership team is having emergency meetings at 6 a.m. every day trying to fix the failing bus routes.
Then that's just a company managing its public image while doing the hard work. There's no management inversion there.
Okay, got it.
But management inversion occurs when leadership actually starts believing their own marketing. It happens when the executives, the senior planners, the highest paid staff members, when they redirect their actual time and mental energy toward those secondary shiny initiatives.
Ah, so their focus shifts.
Right. Executive attention is a finite resource. If the CEO and the senior operations managers are spending 20 hours a week managing a tiny promotional tech pilot, that is 20 hours too. They are not spending solving systemic maintenance backlogs on the core network.
So they're essentially walking the walk of a Silicon Valley tech startup while completely neglecting the reality of being a municipal transit provider.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
The crisis in the daily bus network just gets delegated down to middle management or maybe ignored entirely while the top brass chases the next exciting project.
And the framework treats leadership's attention as just as critical a resource as actual tax dollars. When executive focus drifts away from the mundane core mission, the entire operational structure of the agency begins to weaken.
But, I mean, distraction is just mental. Eventually, this pathology has to hit the physical budget.
It always does.
And that brings us to the most tangible part of the methodology. After looking at optics and leadership focus, the framework shifts to the cold, hard data, looking for what they call resource inversion. This is where we measure the physical operational trade-off. Resource inversion happens when tangible assets, we're talking funding, personnel, fleet capacity, operator hours, or dispatch resources, are assigned to those secondary initiatives.
And doing so measurably reduces the capacity available for the core service.
Exactly.
So this would be like taking your best mechanic off the floor to go manage a special weekend event, leaving the regular buses to just break down in the depot.
Yes, that's a perfect example. But auditing government money is incredibly complicated because, well, not all money is created equal.
Right.
So the framework uses this really vital concept here called discretionary capacity to make sure the audit is actually fair.
Discretionary capacity, meaning resources that are not legally restricted to a specific purpose, right?
Exactly. This is a critical protection for the agency. Because often, a transit authority might receive a massive grant from the federal government that dictates the money can only be spent on a specific environmental initiative.
Like purchasing zero-emission vehicles.
So they legally cannot spend that federal grant on hiring more drivers for their standard diesel buses, even if they desperately want to.
Even if it would solve all their problems.
Wow. So the auditor cannot penalize them for spending millions on a secondary environmental pilot while the core service is short-staffed because the money wasn't discretionary.
Exactly. The audit strictly isolates the time, money, and staff that the agency actually has the freedom to move around.
Unrestricted funds.
Unrestricted funds.
Yeah.
And once they isolate those unrestricted resources, they apply what is arguably the most powerful analytical tool in the entire document, the counterfactual test.
The counterfactual test. This is essentially applying a rigorous personal budget analysis to a massive bureaucracy. It asks a structured what-if question.
Right.
Think about your own discretionary income at the end of the month. Say you have $500 left over after rent and groceries. That is your discretionary capacity.
That's nice.
Right. So you decide to spend it on a luxury weekend getaway. But at the exact same time, your car's transmission is slipping and desperately needs to be repaired so you can, actually get to work.
The counterfactual test looks at your weekend getaway and asks, if you had not spent that unrestricted money on the vacation, what measurable improvement could you have made to your car?
Right. Could you have afforded the mechanic?
And if the answer is yes, but you actively chose the vacation while your daily commute is in jeopardy, you have a documented resource inversion in your personal life.
So translating that back to the transit agency, the auditor isolates the discretionary funds spent on the shiny app or like the promotional shuttle and asks, if we took all of that time, money, and staff and pointed it directly at the core fixed route network, could we have added an extra bus during the evening rush hour?
Could we have reduced wait times by 10 minutes on the city's busiest route?
Exactly. And if the auditor can mathematically prove that those unrestricted resources could have measurably improved the failing core service, the agency is caught red-handed.
They are. But wait, if an agency is actively draining money and staff away from their core buses, wouldn't their daily data show a massive operational failure?
You would think so.
I mean, the board of directors or the city council would see the plummeting metrics and step in, right?
And that brings us to the final and honestly perhaps most insidious area of the audit, performance measurement inversion.
Yes.
Because to get away with draining resources from the core mission, an agency has to alter how success is actually measured. They start tracking the completion of projects, what the framework calls outputs, while failing to maintain or publish the data necessary to evaluate daily performance.
Understanding the difference between an output and an outcome is just essential here. An output is simply a checkbox.
We successfully launched the new app.
We completed the 3-month scooter pilot.
We held 4 community promotional events.
Right. These are highly controllable metrics. You can measure them, you can package them into a beautiful graphic for the annual report, and declare a 100% success rate.
Because an output is just launching something. You can do that from a desk in headquarters. But performance is whether the 8 a.m. bus actually showed up in the rain, which is messy, it's unpredictable, and vulnerable to real-world friction.
And an agency suffering from this pathology would much rather track outputs because it gamifies success. It creates a shield of artificial competence.
Wow. Artificial competence.
Yeah, because performance data is brutal. It's on-time percentages, it's the number of routes dropped due to mechanical failure. So performance measurement inversion happens when an agency's entire data apparatus becomes obsessed with celebrating secondary outputs, while mysteriously their ability to track actual daily reliability degrades.
They might stop publishing their on-time performance dashboards altogether, or, bury the data so deep in an 800-page PDF that the public can never find it.
It is kind of like stepping on a bathroom scale that only tells you how many times you swiped your gym card this month, but absolutely refuses to tell you how much you weigh.
That is such a good way to put it. You get to feel fantastic about your inputs while remaining completely blind to the actual outcome.
You can be batting 1,000 on your project checklist while your transit network is literally collapsing on the highway.
By replacing performance metrics with output metrics, leadership creates an alternate reality where they are always succeeding, regardless of the actual user experience.
Exactly.
But, if the data is being manipulated like that, it brings up a really important question about accountability. How does this framework ensure it is measuring real harm to the community?
Right.
We have to ground this in reality because auditing for the sake of auditing just creates more bureaucracy. What if an agency is just suffering through a terrible macroeconomic cycle?
Yeah, totally out of their control.
Right. A nationwide labor shortage, a sudden spike in fuel costs, or a massive funding cut from the state legislature will make any service suffer. How does the auditor know the agency isn't just broke and struggling to survive?
Well, the authors built a very strict safeguard into the methodology to address exactly that. To get a formally supported finding of institutional priority inversion, an auditor cannot simply point to a failing bus network and blame the executives.
Okay.
The framework explicitly requires the auditor to control for external constraints. You cannot punish an agency for inflation or a global supply chain crisis.
So the auditor has to prove causality.
Yes, they have to use the concept of material displacement. The framework requires a demonstrable reduction in core service capacity, like fewer buses on the road or shorter operating hours, that is directly attributable to the allocation of resources to the secondary project.
So you have to draw a straight, undeniable line between the shiny object and the failing core service.
Exactly. You have to prove the system isn't failing because times are tough.
Yeah.
It is failing because leadership actively chose to put their discretionary capacity into a distraction.
Wow.
And even then, the framework demands one final crucial piece of evidence before finalizing a diagnosis, an examination of the rider outcome.
The rider outcome. This is where all that bureaucratic terminology just falls away and the human cost becomes the ultimate metric. The text defines a rider outcome as a measurable adverse consequence experienced by the passenger as a direct result of the inversion.
And the examples the framework provides are heavy. They're incredibly sobering. They aren't looking at minor inconveniences like being 5 minutes late.
No.
They're looking for instances of missed work, missed medical care, excessive and unreasonable travel times, failed transfers that leave people completely stranded, or the inability of passengers to travel during necessary hours.
I feel like this is the beating heart of the entire document. We are not talking about academic management theory or slightly inefficient budget spreadsheets here.
Oh.
When a public agency suffers from institutional priority inversion, the result is a single mother losing her hourly job because her bus was canceled for the third time in a week, all while the transit executives were busy doing a photo op for a new microtransit app.
Yeah. The result is an elderly person missing a vital medical appointment because the dispatch resources were quietly reassigned to a weekend festival shuttle.
By forcing the auditor to tie the bureaucratic decisions, the PR spin, the executive meetings, the budget transfers directly to missed work and missed medical care, the framework strips away the protective layer of corporate speak.
It really does. It makes the abstract consequences of executive distraction completely undeniable. It holds leadership accountable not just for their innovative intentions, but for the lived daily reality of the vulnerable people relying on their core mission.
It is a methodology that demands the main thing remains the main thing.
Exactly.
So to summarize the toolkit we've unpacked today for you, you no longer have to just accept an organization's public narrative at face value. When you interact with a frustrating institution, you can look at the symptoms.
Yes. You can ask if they are suffering from narrative inversion, pumping out PR about secondary projects while ignoring systemic flaws.
You can look for management inversion, where executives are chasing shiny objects instead of fixing basic infrastructure.
You can look at their data and ask if they are using performance measurement inversion to gamify their success with outputs instead of outcomes.
And you can mentally run a counterfactual test on their budget to see if those resources could have been spent fixing the core problem.
Having this vocabulary is just incredibly empowering. It allows you to articulate exactly why a mismanaged institution is failing you, moving you past vague frustration into actual structural critique.
It really changes how you look at things.
It does. And this specific audit framework was explicitly designed for the Macon-Bibb County Transit Authority and their fixed route buses. But I want you to think about the other major institutions in your life.
Oh, this is a good point.
Think about your local school district. Think about your city council, your regional healthcare provider, or even the massive technology platforms and software suites you rely on to do your job every day.
Yeah.
If we took this exact same priority inversion methodology and we audited them right now, looking for narrative imbalances, analyzing their discretionary capacity, running the counterfactual test, how many of them would pass?
That is a scary thought.
How many of the institutions we trust implicitly are quietly letting their essential core services decay simply because their leadership is too distracted chasing the next shiny object?
Next time you see a massive corporate rebranding campaign launched by a company that can't even get its basic customer service phone lines to work,
You'll know exactly what's going on.
you will know exactly what pathology you are looking at. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.